So thank you. It's lovely to be here today to share some of my thoughts with you. In 2006, I stumbled across neuroscience by complete accident, and I'd carried my brain around in my head for the best part of 40 years without paying it any attention. I don't know if any of you are like that as well. What happened when I started to delve into the research is I became incredibly excited because I started to more fully understand what was driving my behaviour and also what was driving behaviour of other people in the workplace. And it profoundly changed how I acted as a leader, how I managed change, how I self-regulated, and even how I parented. And so I want to talk today about really exploring performance and well-being and how it links with a fundamental question that we're constantly asking and assessing: am I safe or am I not safe? I'm sure some of you might be familiar with Dan Pink. In 2009, in his TED Talk, The Puzzle of Motivation, he proposed that there was a really significant mismatch between what science is showing and what business does. And I want to suggest that despite him talking about this in 2009, and I remember I was very excited, I thought, yay, here's someone talking about something that I'm also paying attention to. I want to suggest that I think there is still a mismatch between what science shows and what business does, despite decades of research now where we're seeing research emerging from neuroscience, particularly social neuroscience, that has profound implications for well-being and performance at work. And if you think about the cost to the Australian economy of psychological distress, it's been estimated at about $5.9 billion, which is quite significant. So I want to delve a little bit into what the science shows and what we should be paying attention to in the context of well-being and performance. And it's really fundamentally impacted by the answer to a very simple question: am I safe or not safe? And what we've noticed is, as I mentioned, that the fields of social neuroscience and affective psychology really helps us to understand how this occurs. And I've been collaborating with Professor Justin Kennedy, who is a professor of applied organisational neuroscience, and he has recently published a chapter looking at his model of organisational wellbeing neuroscience. My own PhD studies is looking at what drives behaviour and how we can understand that in the context of performance. So we've been collaborating together to build a model that helps better explain what's happening in individuals in the workplace. If you think about, I mentioned before that I stumbled across neuroscience by accident, and it's really understanding our brain that helps us understand and better understand why our brain's fundamental job is to keep us safe. Really, your brain is constantly on the lookout for things that could harm us or help us in order to stay alive and continue as a species. So this means that outside of your conscious awareness, that your brain is making assessments about both your physical safety and also your emotional social safety. So let's take a little look at what our kind of research together and how we've been, what we've kind of come to. And if you think about what happens moment by moment, and think about any social context that you find yourself in. So you might, if you think about teams, it can even be a customer walking into a store, or even a conversation with someone on the telephone or on Zoom. What's happening in that moment is that your brain is taking information in through your senses, and we take in about 11 million bits of information per second. If we were aware of that, we'd go into complete meltdown. So your brain selectively decides what we should notice. So if you see the sense, notice. And if we are taking in information, we're also matching it with past experiences and past memories. What happened last time I was in a similar situation. And this activates what we call our snap reflex. And when our snap reflex is activated, this is what changes our whole kind of neurological response in that moment, and it activates the flight, or freeze response. And this is particularly when we've made a snap judgment in the moment that we're not feeling safe. We've We've decided that there's a whole bunch of stuff going on. We've taken in information around verbal cues and non-verbal cues. And remember, this happens largely outside of our conscious awareness. And following that snap judgment, that's when we can consciously articulate whether we feel safe or we don't feel safe. And this is where it moves into the realm of psychological safety, and we're more conscious about it in that process. So really what I'm saying is, in terms of what drives behavior, we're constantly making these snap judgments. They either switch on or switch off the snap reflex, and that's what influences our feeling of psychological safety. So what does this mean for what the impact of that is on performance and well-being? If you think we talk about this mode of protective mode through to productive mode. It's kind of like a continuum from obviously feeling very unsafe right through to feeling very safe. Now, the impact of when we don't feel safe is that we know that means that their attention turns inward, we hunker down, we become more risk adverse, we'd see higher levels of cortisol flooding through our body, and we can just be going through the motions. So we might not necessarily be very engaged in our workplace. And we will be quite resistant to change. Now, on the other hand, if you're in productive mode, your focus of attention moves outward. You're more likely to speak up and speak out, share your ideas, take risks. You're more willing to make mistakes. And we'll see that people are naturally more change open and resilient. I guess what our research has led us to is a conclusion that maybe there's a precursor to psychological safety. And this is a term that we've started to describe as social safety. So social safety happens, in that snap judgment, and psychological safety is the result of our assessment. The way in which we're talking about social safety is it's really an individual's perception that they feel socially safe to engage in interpersonal risk-taking. So really we've determined that our social context is safe and that we feel psychologically safe to engage in those interpersonal risk-taking. And I guess at the beginning I kind of talked about the mismatch between what science is showing and what business is doing. And I want to talk a little bit about, from my perspective and from Justin's, what we're seeing business doing. And I guess one of the things that I've been kind of curious about is there's been quite a bit of attention on resilience programs and well-being programs, discounted gym memberships, putting bean bags and free lunches. Now, I really question whether this is going to lift the needle on well-being. So I want to kind of be a bit provocative and suggest that if your focus in your organisation is on developing well-being strategies and initiatives, you might be starting in the wrong place and you might be wasting your money. Well-being at work is a lag indicator. It's the result of a person's experience in the workplace, how psychologically safe they're feeling. And whether I feel safe or not safe in any team social context that we engage with others. And obviously we work in teams, we collaborate, so we're doing a lot of that assessment of our social context. And this is what the other thing that I think is really interesting is this whole idea of lead versus lag. And I think that many of our interventions are starting in the wrong place. So I think even if we're starting with engagement surveys and culture surveys and well-being surveys, these are the lag indicators of a person's perception of their social and psychological safety. And we even see a relationship with a customer experience of their engagement in a social context with your staff, and how socially and psychologically safe you make them feel will impact on their ability, their willingness to buy. So we can see that if we look at starting from the inside out, we start with trying to positively influence social safety and psychological safety, and these lags all move right out to business results. The higher levels of psychological safety you have in your organisation, the better business results you will see. And so I want to pose a little bit of a question: whose responsibility is well-being? Because I think it's really interesting that the research is showing that 75% of employees say that the most stressful part of their job is their immediate supervisor. And we also know that leaders influence psychological safety of their people, social and psychological safety, by as much as 70%. So I guess my question is, why are we trying to teach people to be more resilient, and why aren't we looking at the work environment and how it might be negatively impacting on people's well-being? So I want to talk a little bit about what should businesses be doing to enhance well-being. How can we pay more attention to what we're learning from science that can influence our interventions? The first thing I want to talk about is we should be measuring psychological safety. And in 2018, I co-founded another company, Conductor Software, and for the first time in the world, we were able to measure psychological safety through 25 questions and link it with KPIs, both financial and non-financial, to show that there is a relationship between psychological safety and performance. This was a missing piece of the puzzle, and in fact, Amy Edmondson, my colleagues, have been in contact with her. She's really excited by the work we're doing because it's taking her work to new levels of actually showing the evidence and the proof that there is a very strong relationship between these two things. Secondly, I think we need to be rethinking leadership programs. If the brain drives behavior, why aren't we talking about the brain and helping people to better understand how our biology impacts, or neurobiology impacts, on how we lead? And I think there are some really important skills to support people to positively influence the social safety climate of every single situation they engage in, and as such, the psychological safety of team members. So I think this needs to be a much stronger focus in leadership programs, and our interventions for people that have low psychological safety need to be different from people that have higher levels of psychological safety. And finally, I think in terms of what businesses should be doing, we need to move away from this onus of responsibility being on individuals and really be thinking about, what is it that we can do to positively influence the environment that then in turn influences people's well-being in the workplace. So workplace well-being, to me, I think if you're trying to positively influence workplace well-being, you need to start in the right place. And the right place is to try and positively influence social and psychological safety so that everyone can feel safe. If you get this right, your people will be they'll be engaged, they'll be more innovative, and your people and your business will flourish. Finally, I'd like to just draw your attention to a couple of things that might be useful for you. We're offering 5 free micro psychological safety assessments for the first people that contact us, and we can do that with up to 20 people, and we'll also do a debrief. So you get a bit of a taste to see what our tool measures. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Linda Ray. Would love to connect with you. And we also have free resources on our website. If you go into our blog and look at webinars, there's a ton of free webinars on there. So I'd love you to join me on my mission to change the world one brain at a time. And I hope you had some insights and gained something from this. So thank you very much.
I love that mission, Linda. I mean, it's an audacious goal, isn't it? Yeah, I think you can see from the chat that people have really responded really well to your talk, and you've picked up a lot of valuable information from in the last 15 minutes. So thanks for doing that.
You're very welcome.